Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. Just want to take a few quick moments to introduce myself. My name is Ram, and I'm an IT security and cyber risk specialist at Manageengine. As part of my role, I keep myself updated about the latest attack tactics and techniques that adversaries use against organizations, and also about the ways in which organizations can fight back against these adversaries. Ransomware is a type of an attack that I've been following quite closely over the last 3 years. Anyways, in Manageengine, we make a unified SIM solution called Log 360, and I spend a lot of my time showing customers how they can use an effective SIM like Log 360 to defend themselves and their network from attacks such as ransomware. So that's a little about me. The topic of my talk is how to use the MITRE ATT&CK framework to stop ransomware. And in the next 30 or so minutes, we'll try and break this topic down. My objective is to convince you that using the MITRE ATT&CK framework in conjunction with your SIM solution is the best way to fight ransomware. So let's go and into the agenda for the day. So here's the agenda. We'll first see what makes ransomware such a big threat for organizations. Then we'll cover the typical 5-stage anatomy of any ransomware attack. After doing that, we can go over the different tactics, techniques, and procedures of the attack framework and map these 5 stages of ransomware to the attack framework. Finally, we'll explore some effective ways of defense. So, why is ransomware such a big threat? Well, ransomware has become all pervasive across organizations, not limited to any region or company size or industry for that matter. In fact, according to a study by VirusTotal, we had more than 130 different ransomware strains in just the last 24 months. So around the time that COVID-19 happened. Not just that, according to research by IDC, 37% of organizations around the world were ransomware victims in some way, shape, or form in 2021, just last year. Furthermore, the total cost of ransomware was $20 billion, and it cost businesses close to $2 million to recover from an attack in 2021. So these are all stats from last year. So now let's take a look at a very famous ransomware attack from 2021 and see what we can learn from it. So this is the example you have in this slide here. In May of last year, in May of 2021, one of the largest companies in the US became a victim of ransomware. And the hacking group called DarkSide was found to be responsible for it. Later on, investigations revealed that the root cause of the attack was just one single compromised account or compromised password. What happened was that about 1 week before this attack became public knowledge, attackers had gained entry into the organization's network through a VPN connection. Now, this VPN account was no longer in use at the time of the attack, but it still had access, and that was a wrong thing to happen. The password of this particular account, of this particular VPN account, had been leaked on the dark web, and that may have been the reason how the attackers got a hold of it. Anyways, this VPN account did not use any multi-factor authentication, and that made it all the more easy for attackers to get in. So anyway, the attackers got in, and they escalated their privileges and moved laterally before deploying the ransomware and encrypting sensitive files. And one more thing that I want to say here, this attack was not the regular ransomware attack where the data just gets encrypted and a ransom is demanded. The attackers also exfiltrated about 100 GB of data and threatened to leak all the data if the ransom was not paid. So this was actually a double extortion ransomware. So the attackers demanded a ransom for the decryption of the files. So that typically happens in any ransomware attack, a ransom for the decryption of the files. But they also said, pay or else we are going to release the data publicly. So that made it a double extortion ransomware. So this is the example. Having gone over this example, let's now discuss the 5 stages of any ransomware attack. And that's what you have in this slide here. So you've got initial exploitation, installation, backup destruction, encryption, and extortion or blackmail. So these are the 5 steps of any ransomware attack. So we'll go over each of these stages one by one now. First stage is initial exploitation. And initial exploitation is required for ransomware to get a foothold into the network. This can be achieved by things like a phishing or spam email that contains a malicious link or attachment. In fact, this is what happens in 42% of ransomware attacks. The innocent victim either downloads the attachment or visits the malicious website, and this in turn downloads a malware or a malcode onto their system. That's the initial foothold right there. So that's one way. Or it could be a case of brute forcing weak remote desktop connections. This happens in another 40% of the ransomware attacks. Now, many of you may be familiar with the Snake ransomware or the ECANS ransomware from 2020. This particular ransomware strain was notorious for taking down weak RDP connections. A lot of people had started working from home in 2020, and the Snake ransomware basically leveraged that weak RDP protocols exposed on the public internet. Now, we also saw in our own example from before, the example that I went over with you from 2021, VPNs could be the initial gateway due to compromised accounts. Nowadays, remote work has become the norm for so many employees. So initial access through remote services is becoming more and more popular with attackers. So that's stage one. And you have on the right here, reconnaissance, resource development, and initial access. This is just me mapping initial exploitation to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which we'll go over in more detail a little later. But all of these steps from the MITRE ATT&CK or tactics identified in the MITRE ATT&CK can be put alongside initial exploitation or mapped with initial exploitation, stage one of the ransomware attack. Then you have installation, stage two of any ransomware attack. This is where the actual malware gets installed on the victim's machine. And by the victim's machine, I mean, it can even be that very first endpoint that gets infected with or after initial exploitation. Nowadays, certain ransomware variants are sophisticated enough to check if the machine is actually even worth infecting. So the malcode of the ransomware has some logic built in to determine this at the time of installation itself. If the machine is worth infecting, the attack goes forward. And if the machine is not worth infecting, so for example, if the machine is, let's say, a sandbox or a virtual machine, the ransomware will quietly exit or it will even kill itself. Also, at this stage of installation, the ransomware will gain persistence in the network. If the persistence is not gained, that means that it is just a matter of rebooting the machine and the attack can be defeated or curtailed. And ransomware attackers don't want that. They, after all, want to make sure that the malcode is executed every time the machine boots up. And to do this, the ransomware may run certain system-level processes whenever the operating system boots up. Or it could use Windows logon scripts automatically executed during the logon time. So that's stage two installation. Stage three is backup destruction. Now, the ransomware of today is sophisticated, and so backup destruction has become a part of the kill chain. Earlier ransomware attacks only consisted of the ransomware encrypting the sensitive files. But now, to raise the effectiveness of the attack and increase the chance that the victim will pay the ransom, the malcode will also attempt to search for and destroy backup files. Because if you think about it, the attacker knows that after an attack, backups are the first place that the organization will go to. So if they leave the backups as is, that decreases the chances for them to collect a ransom. Therefore, from an adversary's point of view, backup files are a top priority before they encrypt files and demand a ransom. Now, when it comes to backup destruction, the ransomware could first discover things about the backup strategy in the victim's network. So it could enumerate files and directories, or may search in specific locations of a host or network share for certain information within a file system. It could also look for backup folders and drives shared on remote systems. Once the backups are discovered, they can encrypt these backups or even permanently delete them. A very popular way of backup destruction is to delete a shadow copy, right, or shadow copies by using the vssadmin.exe. In fact, the coronavirus ransomware of 2020, once again, this was all the rage just about 2 years back. The coronavirus ransomware is known to do this. It's known to go after the shadow copies using VSS admin. So this is the stage of backup destruction, stage number 3. So now we are on to stage number 4, and that is encryption. Here, slowly, the actual repercussions of the attack will begin to be felt as the victim's files are encrypted. To accomplish this, the installed ransomware or the malcode establishes a connection with a command and control server, and this server gives instructions for the encryption. One popular way for this command and control to take place is through Cobalt Strike, which is a freely available tool. So anybody can find this tool online actually. During the command and control communication, the ransomware may actually take instructions as to what file formats to target for encryption. Or sometimes the list of files and folders that should not be encrypted is hard-coded into the ransomware itself. So that's what it's going to look at, whether, to make the decision on whether to encrypt the files or not. I'll give you an example. Now, in the Snake ransomware, the encryption process actually ignored system files such as WinDIR, program files, local settings, and so on. This is because the attacker wanted the victim to be able to log on to their system, right? If they did not even have the opportunity to log on to their system, how are they going to collect the ransom? Well, they could still do that, but they wanted to make the victim feel scared and fearful. So they still wanted them to log on to their systems, access certain files, but then not access the sensitive files and folders. Every other file type that is not hard-coded into the malcode for ignoring will be encrypted in the Snake ransomware, right? So that's how the Snake ransomware actually operated. So that's stage number 4. We are on to stage number 5 now. So here with this stage, it's time for the ransomware to make its impact actually known. A ransom message appears on the victim's screen informing them that they have been compromised and their important files have been encrypted. Victims are given a specific time by which they should pay a ransom, and this is usually demanded in the form of Bitcoin. And it's only after they pay this amount that they will get their files back. And of course, you can never trust these attackers, right? It's not a given that they will give your files back. So, but yeah, they demand that ransom in the form of Bitcoin. And what you have in the slide in front of you is typically what the ransomware message looks like. So I'll just read it out for you because it might be a little too small. So it says, we breached your corporate network and encrypted the data on your computers. The encrypted data includes documents, databases, photos, and more, all encrypted using military-grade encryption algorithms, AES 256 and RSA 2048. You cannot access those files right now, but don't worry, you can still get those files back and be up and running in no time. So that's what the message over here actually says. Now, encryption itself, well, that is performed by different ways, right? So stage 4, we spoke about everything being encrypted, and of course here in the ransom node, we're also talking about the fact that the files have been encrypted. There are different ways in which the encryption can actually take place. It's symmetric encryption or asymmetric encryption, or nowadays it's a combination of the two. That's how the encryption actually happens nowadays. So fighting ransomware with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or defending with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We've just covered the way in which ransomware actually operates. What should we do to fight ransomware? One of the best ways to fight ransomware, according to me, is to make extensive and comprehensive use of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So this framework brings a great deal of structure to how you can understand adversary behavior. It identifies 14 different tactics, all the way from reconnaissance, resource development, which are part of the pre-attack matrix. And then we step into a world of the actual attack matrix. So we start with initial access. That's tactic number 1 in the actual attack. Execution, persistence, privilege escalation, and so on. All the way to command and control, exfiltration, and impact. These are 14 different tactics identified in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And that's what you have in this slide in front of you. So, like I said, reconnaissance and resource development are what's called as pre-attack tactics. And initial access all the way to impact are tactics of the actual attack matrix. Now, apart from the tactics that you see here, the framework also identifies numerous techniques and sub-techniques that attackers use to accomplish each of these tactics. In addition to this, the framework gives procedures or real-life examples of the use of the techniques and sub-techniques by different threat groups around the world. And finally, it also lists possible mitigation and detection techniques that organizations can use at every stage of the attack. The different tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques give you a granular look at the different adversary behavior. And you can also actually map the overall 5 stages of ransomware that we discussed earlier to the tactics that you see on the screen here. So, for example, the initial exploitation that we spoke of earlier as the first stage of ransomware can be clearly mapped to reconnaissance, resource development, and initial access. Right? So that is the first stage. The installation of ransomware can be mapped to execution, persistence, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and command and control. These are all granular tactics identified in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Now, backup destruction can be a part of the final tactic called impact. So is encryption. That is also a part of the tactic called impact. And so is extortion. So basically, this tactic impact is all about the adversary trying to manipulate, interrupt, or destroy data. Okay, so now that we know the typical anatomy of ransomware, and we also know that it can be mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, the so what question still remains, right? How can we use this in a practical real-world setting to protect against such threats? And this is what you need to do for that. Staying on top of ransomware, you've got to start with a comprehensive risk assessment. You've got to perform a comprehensive risk assessment, identify all the important files, folders, servers, databases, and other parts of your infrastructure that could be a target of a ransomware attack. Use benchmarks prevalent in your geography and in your industry and arrive at relevant probabilities of attack. Then build your most important ransomware use cases. What kind of ransomware attack do you think you're most susceptible to? What are the threat groups that you're at most risk from? So we'll take an example of the snake ransomware right now. So let's suppose that you want to protect yourself from the snake ransomware or the ECANS ransomware. So ECANS is just snake spelled backward. That's the second name of the snake ransomware. So let's suppose that through your risk assessment and your own research, you figure out that snake ransomware is a ransomware strain that you're most at risk from. So you'll notice that this framework, that the MITRE ATT&CK framework, highlights several techniques and sub-techniques that snake is known to use. You actually have a list of 9 different techniques, and that's what I have on the slide right here. This is straight from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, from the MITRE ATT&CK website. And these are all the different techniques that the snake ransomware is known to have used. And from here, you can download the information and lay it on top of the actual matrix. So I've highlighted here attack navigator layers. You just need to click on that and export the file either as an Excel file, or you can even view it online. And you get to lay it all out on the actual matrix. So I just have it over here. This is a busy slide. Sorry for that. But you can see all the different techniques that snake ransomware is known to use here on the slide. So with the techniques colored as we have over here, it will look exactly this way. The techniques and sub-techniques that you must protect yourself from include things like data encrypted for impact. So you've got all of these techniques, right, that we have on the previous slide. So data encrypted for impact. So this one is technique 1486. You also have techniques such as impaired defenses, inhibit system recovery, masquerading, obfuscated files or information, process discovery, service stop, system network configuration discovery, and Windows management instrumentation. So if you actually go onto the MITRE ATT&CK website, you can get to read about all of these techniques and what is actually involved with all of these techniques. You'll then go ahead and try to implement the mitigation and detection guidelines identified in the framework as well. So that's how you can make good use of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So for doing something so comprehensive, you first have to make sure that you're collecting logs from all the sources where relevant information exists. And then you would collect all the logs in a SIM solution to make sense of what is happening. Now, if your SIM solution is able to use the structure of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and by that I mean if your SIM, out of the box with no extra configuration, has a grasp on the tactics and techniques of the framework, it will make life much more simpler for you. So in such a scenario, you can run the MITRE ATT&CK-based analytics using your SIM solution, and you'll see dashboards that clearly highlight the occurrence of any strange tactic or technique. Furthermore, you can get alerted about it. So that's what I have here on the slide. This is just an example from Manageengine Log 360 and how we actually are able to map out the different tactics and techniques and sub-techniques identified in the attack matrix within our SIM solution. And by doing this, you get to see all of this in a very, very neat report. So you get all of these analytics. And on top of that, you can configure alerts whenever required. Also, an effective SIM solution can help you write rules of detection as per the requirement of your organization. So that is how you can actually use an effective SIM along with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Let me also quickly go over some tips to detect ransomware. So here are some tips that I've highlighted in the slide in front of you. You've got to detect changes to GPOs in real time. Now, one of the most common ways for ransomware to gain entry into a network is through an insecure RDP connection. Organizations should therefore constantly monitor changes to users' remote access rights in group policy. Alerts can be configured so that you get notified when specific users' remote desktop access rights actually change. It might be best for the organization to follow a policy of not allowing remote access for users unless absolutely required to perform their job. Monitor user logons. Users can log on using RDP, Radius, and VPNs. Organizations should monitor each of these logon types and analyze both the source computer name and the source IP address. Any unusual activity needs to be detected immediately. Furthermore, action should be taken if the telltale signs of malicious activity, such as a brute force attack, are noticed. Analyze if an attacker is attempting to hide their tracks. So point number 3, analyze evasion tactics. Now, one of the first things that attackers do after gaining an initial foothold is attempt to hide their tracks by deleting event logs. After doing this, they may try to change audit policies so that further actions are not logged. Organizations should be able to detect both of these malicious activities. Look for unusual software installations or service installations. An organization should be able to detect unusual software being installed anywhere in its network. In case unusual services or processes are started, these should again be detected in real time. It's even better if the organization is able to kill unusual processes through an automated incident response mechanism. So that is that. And you've also got to monitor firewall configuration rules. Several ransomware variants, including the snake ransomware, make changes to firewall rules before encryption. Unusual configuration changes must be detected and stopped. Detect deletions of shadow copies. Shadow copies are stored locally on a machine at the root of the Windows volume in the system volume information folder. File integrity monitoring can help detect any change in or deletions from this folder, and you've got to have the ability to do this. Your SIM solution can help with that. Of course, look for unusual file activity. Ransomware performs several file activities such as file accesses, file modifications, and file renames. These activities are usually performed in very, very short periods of time across different files. Organizations should be alerted in case this happens, especially if there's a whole lot of reads, and after a very, very short time after those whole lot of reads, you have a whole lot of file changes or file encryptions. Something is happening, right? So you've got to be able to, or file deletions for that matter. So you've got to be able to detect all of that. So look for unusual file activity. Of course, implement multi-factor authentication. MFA should be used at as many user touchpoints as possible. Even two-factor authentication can go a long way in deterring attacks. And the last point, get alerts from cisa.gov. This is a low-hanging fruit for anyone. Please do get alerts from this. It's a free service, and anybody can make use of this. It will help you keep your organization secure proactively. So this is what we have. So next steps, I just want to make a quick point about Manageengine. So Manageengine Log 360 is a unified SIM solution with DLP and CASB capabilities that can detect ransomware. Our company was started in the year 2001, so it's been 20 years for us. And Manageengine is actually a division of Zoho Corporation. And we do have a virtual booth at this summit. And it would be very, very nice if you could all visit us at our virtual booth. Ask us for a personalized demo of Log 360 as well. And we'll be very happy to take you over a demo of Log 360. We also have our ebook, Ransomware Demystified. And if you can get your hands on that ebook, please give it a good read. I think it contains a lot of information about how ransomware, especially snake ransomware, actually works. That pretty much brings me to the end of the session here. My name is Ram. If you have any questions, you can always email me. My email address is right there on the screen. It's ram.b@manageengine.com. Alternatively, you can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is coffee and cybers. So it'd be great if we can connect over there. Again, thank you all so very much for being a part of this session. I hope you learned something, and I hope you can implement that one thing in your organization once you're back. Thank you all so very much once again. Thank you.